It's been nearly 4.5 years since I've recently updated my post on the Grieving episode, and I do apologize if anybody's been waiting for some time for a probable explanation. To start this all off, my brother is still missing, and my parents have since been put in prison for likely being the cause of my brother's disappearance and possible murder, which even to this very day, I do not, cannot, and will never buy into. It's actually still pretty difficult to even type this all down while thinking about the episode again. And dear God in heaven, does it still fuck with my head every time I think about it. Now, before I get into the meat of the story, I do feel as though a few questions regarding this episode should be answered, as I've noticed that many people have had a lot of questions asking me about this episode and everything that went on with it. So I'm going to answer at least a few of them. Question number 1. Why did the episode only show on your television? Simple answer, I have no idea how that was even possible. Long answer, likely chances the person who had hijacked the network station wanted to just find a random house to fuck with. And honestly, if you really think about it, it's kinda understandable that he'd do that. Think about it for a moment. If this killer had actually aired this entire thing on numerous network stations and numerous TVs, don't you think that he'd likely be an easy target due to the fact that the signal likely chances being tracked back to him? I mean, likely chances no, as that would have been one of the stupidest things a criminal like himself could have likely done. I mean, honestly, if he was willing to do that, he might as well go into a police station and just be handcuffed right then and there, if that's what he was going to do. Question number 2. Why didn't you film the thing when you had the chance? And more importantly, why did all those crazy things happen to you? Well, if any of you had actually read my post about the whole story, you'd likely know that I was a lot more freaked out when the whole thing really started to kind of go the way that it did. And because of it, I wasn't exactly reacting in the most logical way possible. Oh, and as for the doors locking themselves, I honestly can't really explain it. I mean, maybe my hands were probably so sweaty as all hell from the fear I was going through that I just couldn't really get too much of a grasp on the damn knob and I thought that they were locked. I mean, I don't really know. I can't really remember too much from it, as it's been a while, but that's likely to be the case, as my palms do get extremely sweaty whenever I'm, I don't know, fearful, I guess? Plus, honestly, I didn't have anything with me, a camera or anything to really record this episode with anyway. I didn't have a smartphone or anything at the time, and even if I did, I don't even know if I would have been able to get the opportunity to film the damn thing anyway, as it only aired once. Question number 3. Have they found the serial killer yet? Thankfully, yes they did. They found him about a month ago. However, he was already dead by the time that they had found him. It was due to starvation and dehydration that he went through. What's honestly kind of funny is the fact that he was found dead in the deepest part of the woods of Mississippi. Honestly, the whole irony in that whole thing, especially after that episode, was really, really funny to me when I had first read that on the news on Facebook. Question number 4. Has Rob Buteller ever contacted you again about sending you that email? Well, to be honest, no, and I don't expect him to, seeing as how he's still particularly busy on the amazing world of Gumball, and it's likely that, he just doesn't have the time or the light to sit there and actually contact me again about it. Then again, he kind of did explain everything in that one email, so I guess that was more or less basically that in of its own self was just kind of one and done. But even then, I still to this day refuse to contact him about the episode anymore, because likely chances continuously having to relive the same memory of what he did and the guilt would likely cause a little bit more damage on him on a mental level. And honestly, it just really wouldn't be worth it. Especially not with how far he's in. And even if I did decide to do that, likely chances he would most likely block my contact and I'd never be able to talk to him again. Question number 5. Was there anything within that episode itself that you managed to piece together? And if you did, what was it? This is actually where the meat of the story really starts to come in. I honestly didn't think that something like this would be so oblivious to me at the time, and to many others who read the story, but after going over the episode over and over again in my head, and what I've written online, which thankfully I've kept on me, I've actually managed to put the pieces of the episode and what it was about together. The episode in question, after the scene with Richard and Nicole crying their eyes out, actually more or less truly begins with Gumball, before school began, making the fake phone call to Principal Brown, telling him that Gumball wouldn't be going to school that day due to him being sick. When the principal buys that without second guessing anything. Once this was completed, Gumball would then go into the kitchen and steal a knife from the drawer, or a holder of some sort, and put it into his backpack for the time being. Once he was done doing that, Gumball, Darwin, and Ananias would get on the bus, go to school, and would then do their usual thing until recess time. Once recess began, Gumball would then lure both Darwin and Ananias deep into the woods to go and, well, what honestly is wanting to be done is anybody's guess. I mean, it could possibly do with something that's actually really important, or likely just a stupid excuse to have an adventure or something by Gumball. The two, of course, would be rather skeptical about this at first, but would ultimately agree not too long afterwards. Upon making their way deep into the woods, Gumball would then pull out the knife and ready himself for a bit, before taking it and stabbing the two of them to death, hence the reason why their bodies were found in the woods and heavily mutilated in the process. Then, once both were dead, Gumball would then violate Ananias' corpse, which these were the other fluids mentioning, covering the inside of the box that Gumball had found in the woods, decapitated her, and then put her head in the box just like that, and then would go over to Darwin and, well, cut him open and then throw his organs around like crazy. Pretty much the same, and would ultimately do the same thing with Ananias' body as well. Now, before anybody asks me, I still can't seem to find much of a logical conclusion as to why Gumball would just go out and kill his siblings like that, especially in a graphic way like that. I've thought it over, and still, nothing has still really come of it. I mean, if I honestly had to make a guess as to his reason why he did it, it's likely that he was doing it because he was sick and tired of having to deal with the two of them. Basically just annoyed with their goofy, two-shoed kind of ways. I know it sounds rather petty, but it's the only thing that I've honestly thought was plausible at the time. Once Gumball finishes up with the remains, he would then hide in the forest until school finally had ended, and night had fallen. Once he knew he was alone, and wouldn't get caught, he would then make his way over to an open window that led into Miss Simeon's classroom to stay for the night until morning. That's when he wound up going in there, a sudden wave of guilt and shame would come over him at what he had just done, and what he had more importantly done to his siblings. And it's there that he would fall into a major depression, and just sit there blinking until the morning came. Not sleeping, just sitting there and blinking. That's when he would leave Miss Simeon's room for the second time before the startup of the day. Gumball, now fearing the worst, would run back into the forest with a knife and begin to dismember the bodies again. This time, instead of doing anything rash, he simply just wanted to make sure that it was easier for him to bury the body in different parts, that way nobody could find them. However, just as he's about to start digging the hole, the police would begin making their way into the forest, which would cause Gumball to panic again and slip and fall into Darwin's body, getting blood covering and soaking all over his clothes in the process. He would then escape once more, and hide deep in the woods so that nobody could find him. He would only leave that area once the police had finally left the scene. This is where the scene with Richard and Nicole would come into play in the episode, with Principal Brown informing them about the missing whereabouts of their children. At this time, whenever they were having their conversation, Gumball would then sneak back into Miss Simeon's classroom for the second time, this time completely and utterly disheartened and completely destroyed about everything that had happened that day. He would then hear, not too long afterwards, his mother's cries and screams, and then both the parents' distant crying and voices coming from Principal Brown's office. to which it would absolutely shatter him into a million pieces due to the guilt. Not wanting to face the guilt or the consequences anymore, Gumball then wound up finding a large rope in Miss Simeon's desk and made a noose out of it, before finally hopping down from the desk once tying it onto the ceiling, hanging himself in the process. When the police had finally arrived once more to check around the place, as Principal Brown had already called them up for the second time, they would then find Gumball's now long dead corpse hanging from his neck in the room. The final part of the episode that ties pretty much everything together is a scene with Richard and Nicole crying their eyes out on the sofa, having lost not one, not two, but all three of their children in the span of 2 days. That was what I honestly was able to find out about the whole thing. Honestly, I don't think that really coming up with that particular conclusion and really piecing everything together really helped me feel any better. In fact, actually, it only fills my head with a lot more questions. Now, as for the clips at the end of the episode, honestly, if I had to come up with something that might have been incorporated into it, it's very much likely that the clips themselves represented what was going on through Gumball's mind during and after the time that he had killed his siblings. At least that's what I wound up getting from the damn thing anyway. It's still rather unfortunate, though, that I won't ever be able to watch the episode again, as I do believe that there is so much more to this episode that I may possibly be leaving out unintentionally. But until a copy of this ever gets leaked online, or if I'm ever able to get in contact with anybody, or at least get any kind of answers, then I don't think that'll ever truly be the case ever again. As for my little brother, well, he's probably more or less dead at this point. It's been months now and they haven't been able to find him. I don't even know if my parents killed him or not. I want to believe that they didn't, but I just don't know what to believe anymore. Everything's still extremely confusing even now. Hopefully, though, that does answer your questions. I don't know if I'll ever get back to this story ever again, and likely chances, after this, I'm just going to be done with the whole thing. I just can't keep having this episode in my head any more than it already has. Hence the reason why I'm finally finishing this up, and giving a proper explanation for everything that had happened. Like I said before, I truly do hope it answers any questions you've all been asking for.
In fear and surprise, as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping horror-driven nightmarish gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at any day.